Startup Builder Live Q&A. This is the place for startup founders to ask burning questions that are keeping you up at night and learn from our guest founders and startup support experts. And of course, LeapSheep's own startup building experts who have worked with hundreds of founders and their teams over more than a decade. Welcome, I'm your host today, Kirk Drade, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at LeapSheep. At LeapSheep, we're on a mission to flip the 95% startup failure rate by making expert and personalized startup building guidance accessible and affordable for all founders globally. Welcome to our founders who have joined us live. It's fabulous to have you here. This show is all about supporting you to get from idea to build a business model hypothesis that can get the product market fit on paper and then validate that it actually can in the real world before scaling up safely and avoiding that 95% failure rate. Thank you to founders who have sent questions in. And if you're joining us live, please drop questions into the comments section of YouTube or LinkedIn, and we'll prioritize those during the show. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Peter Petroulas. Peter is the founder and CEO of WizButler, a technology startup transforming how restaurants manage bookings and customer experiences. With a background in hospitality and a passion for solving real-world problems through technology, Peter created WizButler to help venues operate more efficiently and deliver exceptional service. The WizButler platform automates reservations, improves guest communication, and equips restaurants with powerful tools to personalize the dining experience. Since launching, WizButler has grown steadily and is now used by venues across Australia, delivering impressive revenue and profit uplift. Peter, it's fabulous to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's jump straight in and dig into a bit of your background, because you're one of these great categories of founders that has deep experience in the industry that you're now building a product for. So you're a former or reforming restaurant owner. Is that right?
That's correct. I think there's quite a few founders sort of similar to me that actually experienced a problem, believed in that problem, seen that solving that problem would help other people, and I guess and yourself in the process, and then you head down that path.
It's a great way to have a passion for a problem, isn't it? Which is what we say to startup founders: get passionate about the problem, not solution, and you'll probably be on pretty good footing.
Yep. I guess with my background, I spent 18 years as the owner operator of 15 different restaurants, cafes, and bars, all in the same building, all at the same time.
Oh wow!
So therefore, I had the benefit of one day eating French food, the next day Italian food, the next day Spanish food. It was a great lifestyle.
How are you so thin?
So that was the process we went through. So over that period, I've seen booking systems being introduced into restaurants, loyalty systems, QR code ordering systems, changes to POS systems. So I'd sort of been through that whole experience of systems coming in and being given to restaurants.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing that you've sort of educated me on since we've been working together about just how much technology is coming to the restaurant space, which has been probably a great benefit for customers, but not always for the restaurant owners, has it?
Look, I'll go a step back. I'm not even sure it's been great for the customers. Because if we just go to a booking system, when a booking system is there, in theory, it's great because now a customer can book a restaurant table 24/7. But when you look at the system itself, it can easily tell the customer the restaurant is full when it's only 60% full. So the customer's sort of been turned away from going to their favourite restaurant because they've got a message it was completely full when it was only 60% full. So the customer didn't succeed. And then when you come back to the restaurant, well, he just lost revenue because, the booking wasn't taken.
It sounds like a classic case that happens in technology if we're over automating. I remember, Elon Musk talked about his vision for Tesla was like automate everything, and 12 or 18 months or 2 years after that, he's like, I over automated. I was too optimistic and I tried to automate too much. And I feel like that's kind of the story that you're saying here is we've kind of over automated and we've actually ended up with a worse customer experience.
I don't think they've over automated. They've wrongly automated.
Yeah.
Because the automation they put in didn't solve the problem. It actually created a different problem. Solved one and created a different problem.
Yeah.
So I guess it was eager to be first to market, and people like OpenTable have been very successful. But the problem there is that they've created other problems that had to be addressed manually for their solution to grow.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a point that I think is just worth making on a completely tangential subject, where we all love talking about AI and what's that going to do to jobs. And I think this point is that for every solution that we create with technology, we sort of create 10 new problems to solve. And I think we'll be quite okay with AI, because we're going to create more problems than we solve.
Look, and I think that's one of the things that we went through with regards to product market fit. And we would do something that potentially solved one small part, but then created additional things that we needed to solve. And if you didn't solve them, then you weren't creating that right solution.
Yeah, and how did you make the leap from running restaurants to going, I need to build a technology company? That's quite a leap.
I guess two things have happened. One, going back to about 2010 is when the online booking system started proliferating in this country here anyway, which is sort of about 10 years behind America. And when they started coming in, one of the first systems that was out there was called ResPack, which has now since been bought by OpenTable. They allowed you to put your own front-end widget to it. So we built our own front-end widget to ResPack. And in doing so, I guess we were introduced to the problems at the back end and why it was inefficient.
So did you have your own development team at that time, or were you using outsource?
No, I had my own web developer.
Yeah, nice.
So we were doing that. So we sort of had that exposure. And then you start thinking about, how can I improve this? And that sort of was about 2011, trying to get my head around it, because obviously no one else had solved it, so it wasn't a simple problem. I guess if I can explain the problem, it's sort of like playing chess. And with chess, it's a lot easier because one piece moves at a time. When you're actually talking about optimizing the floor space, then it's like lifting all the chess pieces up and then rearranging them based on the move of your opponent. So
this is you're talking about the online booking process.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Because, or if you put it in Tetris terms, then you don't know what the size of the next block that's going to fall is, or where it's going to fall. So how can you anticipate where it's going to be? And that's the issue with the booking system, because you don't know what the next booking request is going to be or what the party size is. How can you predetermine how to set up your tables?
Yeah, right.
That's the problem.
So I guess going back to before online booking systems were a thing, the booking person at a restaurant would just sort of figure that out on the fly, would they? Redraw their plan on a bit of paper?
Because when you're doing it, you've got the other bookings in front of you. You're in effect mentally rearranging the bookings in your head and saying, okay, I can move this booking here and that booking there, and then I can rearrange these tables and take this booking. So right. It was done manually by a person. Now, when you go in and the machine's got to do it, the machine can only do it mathematically. And because it's mathematically, it's got to look at every single permutation. And when it goes through it, it's got to try every single permutation. When you're about 60, 65% full, the running through the permutations can take 1 month before you actually get an answer.
And of course, the booking systems don't know the floor space or what furniture the restaurant has, I assume, right?
Well, mathematically, it's actually called an MP complete problem. Okay, and you've got to try every single permutation. And according to MIT, if you have a restaurant that has 100 chairs or 100 tables, and then it takes bookings at 6 o'clock, 6:15, 6:30, 6:45 till 9:30, you have 15 booking intervals. And you've got 100 chairs or 100 tables. Then, within that two-dimensional chart, there's actually 100 to the power of 15 permutations. So when you're looking at it mathematically, 100 by 100 is 10,000. 10,000 by 100 is a million. A million by 100 is 100 million, and I've only spoken about 4 permutations.
Yeah.
And mathematically, you can't do that.
But the booking person can do that in their head. That's just like the power of the human brain, right?
Well, logically, you can segment it because you can turn around and say, okay, you can do simplifications because you've got background. Mathematically, you don't.
Yeah.
And that was the problem.
Yeah, fascinating. So how have you approached solving the problem?
Well, I guess I sort of started the process of saying we need to build a customer-centric system. And to be customer-centric, it's solving the customer's problem, not the restaurant's problem. Because then, I guess even though I was a restaurant person, if you solve the customer's problem, then in theory, you should be able to flow it through to solving the restaurant problem. So you turn around and saying, okay, a customer cannot be told there's no availability if there is availability.
Yeah.
And you went through that process. And it took me a number of years to get my head around it. But I guess what helped me a lot is when I had my 15 restaurants, cafes and bars, one of the things I learned early on is you had to make every square metre count because you're paying a lot of rent. My rent was close to $500,000 a month.
Wow.
So you can't turn around and have half of the floor not working. So we learned about space and using space and managing space. And then, what sort of hit me is what we needed to do was manage space, not what all the existing systems do, which is tables and table combinations. And we moved away from saying, it was the pieces on the chessboard that were important to saying it was actually the chessboard that determined where you could put the pieces.
Yeah, interesting.
And it was through that process that we sort of developed our system and went and solved the problem where now you could actually optimize the space and you could guarantee that you'd never reject a booking.
Yeah, fascinating. So your system is dynamically creating the table layout on the fly as those bookings are coming in.
Correct. So rather than trying to anticipate what the next booking size and requirement will be, which you can never do, on the fly, before a service, of course, because we don't confuse everybody when a service starts, is we actually unseat all previous bookings, add it together with the last received booking. Then you have full information. Because now you've got full information, you can go and rearrange the space. And to give a simple example, if you've got an alcove in the restaurant that can take a maximum of 10 people, well, then it becomes easy because you allocate those 10 people to that space because you've optimized that space because you can't take any more or you can't do better in allocating that space. So you sort of build it up that way. So what we've also done is then we've removed the table from being on the axis, if I can call it that, the allocation axis, to putting it inside the grid because we use a floor plan, so you're talking about length and width. Once the table is inside the grid, now you can rearrange the grid, the position of that table within the grid and give it the different coordinates. And by doing that, now you can rearrange tables, add tables, remove tables on the fly each time you get a new booking request.
So the staff must be going to your system to know how to configure the restaurant when it's time for that dining period.
Yep, we recommend they go there half an hour or 15 minutes before.
Yeah.
They can see the dynamically drawn floor plan on the screen. Then they know where to set up the dining tables. They can do that, start their service, and everything's straightforward.
And one of the things that we're always saying to startup founders is, solve a pants on fire problem. So how big an issue is this for restaurant owners? What's the pants on fire problem here? You talked about space management, and I'm not a restaurant owner, so just break it down for me in simple terms. What does it mean?
I guess if I can use a case study, one of our customers sort of came to us. They're a busy restaurant. It has about 320 seats, so therefore it's quite a large restaurant. And then if we look at their busy day on a Saturday, they used to take about 350 people booked for lunch and 350 people booked for dinner. That was a total of 700. So it's a big restaurant, busy, everything's okay. They're sort of making money. Why would you consider anything else? They approached us by seeing our dynamic software on the website, went through, explained to them that if you're doing that number of people, you've got to be turning real bookings away because you've gone past that 60% full capacity, so you've got to be turning people away. We put our system in, and first week in, it actually took 1,100 people. And then they were averaging 1,100 to 1,200 people after that.
Wow, that's a massive uplift.
A huge uplift. So his revenue increased by almost 50%.
And I guess in the restaurant business, that from a revenue and profitability point of view, you've got a lot of those fixed costs. So your rent, your $500,000 rent per month, that's fixed. So changing the amount of bookings you get is going to significantly impact your profit, isn't it?
Well, in this particular case, absolutely, because he was actually full staffed for the Saturday. So he actually did not need any extra staff. All he was doing is his staff were there and became more efficient. So the only additional cost he had was his food cost. And his food cost is 30% of that revenue. So then his gross margin on that was an uptake of 70%.
Fabulous. So yeah, this is a great pants on fire problem. With most startup founders, when I'm having this sort of conversation, one of the obvious traps that, or not obvious, I shouldn't say that at all. One of the traps that founders can fall into is someone like yourself that's got all this experience in restaurants. I quite often say, like, you're not your usual restaurant owner. Like, most restaurant owners don't go, oh, I'm so sick of these booking systems, I'm going to go start my own software company. Right? Most restaurant owners just don't think like that. So the question is the rest of the market thinking that this is a problem? Even though it is a problem, is it painful enough that they want to do something about it? How did you validate that, or didn't you? Did you sort of skip that piece? Tell us a little bit about that phase.
Look, I ended up skipping a few phases, rightly or wrongly, and I think a lot of founders probably fall into the same trap, is you think you understand a problem intimately enough. You think you understand what its impact is to you, so therefore you have your validation.
Yeah.
Whether that's correct or incorrect.
We've all done it. We all start there.
As we found, and you've helped us through this process as well, is that I guess in the early stages, when we just completed the booking system, we actually spoke to a few restaurants. And I guess, sorry, just to go back a step, we ended up closing our restaurants because of this big bad monster called COVID-19 back in 2020. Our restaurants were located hardcore central CBD in Sydney, the worst possible location for COVID. So therefore, we completely pivoted out of running restaurants or operating restaurants to actually starting the software. So we sort of started the software in a serious way in 2020, even though I was thinking about the problem prior to that, which I mentioned, and I'd actually lodged patent applications in 2017. But we didn't start the actually software building process till after we pivoted out of restaurants. So it sort of took a couple of years to get the software at the booking level right. And when we approached a few restaurants, rightly or wrongly, because they had integrations with other systems, they turned around and said, "Does your booking system integrate with other systems?" The problem that we then had is we couldn't sell the system to anybody because they had this concept of integration, even though their integrations weren't working properly, because you can't integrate existing systems. We can talk about that separately. So then we had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we've got this far. Do we now dumb down our system to be able to integrate with other systems, or do we go and build the other modules of ordering and point of sale and loyalty and continue that process all the way through?
So when you say dumb down your system, just to unpack that a little bit for me, why would you dumb down your system?
Because if we now have a dynamically changing floor plan, then all QR code ordering systems and all point of sale systems, they're all static systems. So they can't accept information from changing floor plans.
Yeah, wow.
So then we'd have to sort of take our changing floor plan. And that's why I say dumb it down. So it's no longer dynamic. It becomes static.
Lower denominator, yeah.
And then sort of force it through, which then sort of defeats the purpose of having something that's dynamic. So then I guess I made the decision in 2022 that we should now go out there and build our own additional systems so we could offer an all-in-one that was completely dynamic.
Yeah, wow, that's a big decision.
Yes. And it's taken a long time to get to the other end because we then changed our minimum viable product from being a wedge or solving one problem to now being a multi-venue, full enterprise-grade system as your MVP.
Wow. And what did you learn through that journey that if you could go back and tell yourself some of those learnings, what would you say to your former self that was sort of embarking on that earlier journey?
I guess, through the benefit of discussions with you, through the benefit of, I guess, our own experience, go out there and get some funding first. Go out and see if you can get a better understanding of product market fit, what the market requires before you go down this path. So then you've got greater vision and greater clarity of what your end outcome is. I guess in our case, we sort of thought our end outcome was the booking system. And then as soon as we created that booking system, then we realised that no one wanted it unless it had integration, albeit the integrations that they were using were useless anyway.
Yeah. Fascinating. So you've kind of ended up in a bit of a position that a lot of founders find ourselves in. I've certainly been there, which is almost the build it and they will come kind of scenario, isn't it? It's like you've built this amazing system. I guess the good news about your particular situation is you've built a system that is replacing established functionality. So you're not building something brand new that no one has ever used before in its entirety. Like, for example, if you think about a system like, I don't know, YouTube is the obvious one that comes to mind. That was a completely new system that hadn't existed in that form before. And if you sort of build it and they don't come, then it's probably sunk cost and you have to go home and do something else. But at least you're fortunate enough that you're in a position where people are buying point of sale systems all the time. They're buying booking systems all the time. They're buying function systems and email marketing systems and so on and so forth. And so now you've built this fully integrated system with radically better functionality. You've just got to do a better job at marketing and sales.
Yes, and I think what also helps us as well is the benefit that the customer will get out of it. And I guess I see the benefit both from a diner's perspective and from a restaurant's perspective, because it sort of brings you into the two aspects of personalisation with regards to the diner and automation and the elimination of repetitive tasks for the restaurant. So yes, you're 100% right. We didn't go into, an environment which was completely new. We went into an established environment, and those challenges are obviously quite different because now we're competing in a saturated marketplace, and it's a matter of trying to get our message across when there is so much noise. Yeah.
But yeah, fabulous. I mean, having looked at your system and know what you've got, I think the innovation that you've got there and the solving a real pants on fire problem, that's certainly a very strong footing for any business. And this is, one of the first questions that we ask any startup founder is, what's that pants on fire problem? And sometimes that answer is a little bit shaky or not even there at all. But in your case, it's absolutely there. There's a real pants on fire problem there, and you've already solved the technical challenges. So you've got through a couple of those major hurdles, and now a lot of it is about improving your understanding of who are the best first customers. And I think this is one of the challenges that we all have when we're building our startup is we've got this vision to take over the world and sell to potentially thousands or millions of customers. But the question that you need to ask yourself is, who is the best first set of customers to go after, and what do they look like? And that's still a process that I assume you're going through right now.
Look, we're going through that together, and I certainly appreciate your help with it. And yes, it's looking at that product that we've built and saying who will get the most benefit out of it. And then you sort of bring it down and say, okay, to get the most benefit out of it, it's got to be a medium-sized restaurant, so at least 100 seats. It's got to be a restaurant that is predominantly dine-in rather than take away, so you can have the benefit of that space management. and that, the personalisation within the space. Then you sort of keep going through that exercise as we have done. So we've got a very clear understanding of who we think our target
your ideal customer profile is. Yeah, we've done some great work together on that, and I think this is again another trap that I see a lot of founders make. I'd love to get any comments if you'd be willing to share. A lot of founders think, well, now that I've got a great product, I know that there's a real problem out there. I know that I've got a great product. Well, it's just a marketing problem. I can just hire a marketing agency and they can solve the problem for me. But in startup land, that's not necessarily true, because you don't only just have a replacement for a point of sale system or a replacement for a booking system. You've actually got a system it's a new product category, really. The product that you built is actually created I think in Steve Blank terms, we'd call it I forget the term that he uses, but it's like GoPro is an example of that. It's not an entirely new product, but it's a new product category within a product, and you've created that. So the established, marketing wisdom about how you would promote a point of sale system or a booking system, you can't draw on any of those lessons or any of those assumptions. And most of the established marketing world out there that's helping businesses are using that knowledge that they've got about the existing industry, and they don't necessarily understand the process that you're just talking about to go through to figure out, well, who is the ideal customer. Can you talk about your experience in some of the the missteps in marketing and some of the challenges that founders have and you've had in marketing?
Look, as we've previously spoken through our workshops, with our system, I've got two core inventions or two core patents. And by definition, in theory, if you have a patent, it's something new that no one's ever done before. Because no one's ever done it before, when you go and actually talk to a restaurant owner or a restaurant manager, you're talking to them about something that obviously they haven't thought about. Or even if they've thought about it, they haven't thought it was possible. So it is the breaking new ground, and you've got to find a way to communicate it to them in very simple terms that they understand. So yes, I agree, it's a new category, it's a new approach, and then there's certain things they've got to change. Now, to give a silly example, training needs to go along with it. It doesn't have to be difficult training, but it's still training. To give you two examples of problems that we got called in from customers yesterday. We take people through their training, we go through all of that, but people have habits because, this is what they've been doing for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you've told them to change it. With our booking system, because we manage the space, we need to know exactly what's going on. So if it's a party size of 9 people that's just walked in, then you've got to put them on 9 chairs. You can't put them on 6 chairs, right? Because it doesn't work that way. So if you really want to put them on 6 chairs, then there's an extra button that you need to put in there to press to say, override it, I don't care.
Yeah.
And the manager's calling us yesterday saying your system can't allocate because I can't put these people on that table. And, but hey, 9 people don't fit on 6 chairs,
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good example, isn't it? Where it's that learned behaviour, as you say, that people have got, that intuition that if you're just replacing a POS system for a POS system, you would probably survive.
Yeah, because all other booking systems don't care. You can put 20 people on a table of 2 because they're not managing space. In our case, because we are, then if you want to do that, you've got to hit an extra button that says override it, I don't care.
Yeah. I think this really speaks to one of the big challenges in startup world where, if you start consuming startup ecosystem information and start talking to the startup ecosystem, and I'm using that in sort of the broader sense, you get this sort of impression, particularly in the last decade or so, that everyone needs to go full software, product-led growth, don't talk to customers, everything should be automated, like online marketing automation, pay with a credit card, sign up, et cetera, et cetera. Which is a great endpoint to get to, but the journey to get there is often the most capital efficient by spending time with your customers, spending deep time with your customers, over investing, which means an individual sale you might not make money on, but these are all the things that you learn as problems that you have to solve if you're going to create a great customer experience that you can then package up as software or online training or whatever. So it sounds like you've really been through that process of working deeply one-on-one with a number of customers.
Look, we have, and it's been an important part of it. And I guess the biggest thing that's sort of coming out is that we've got to find a way of getting people to be able to continuously think different, at least for that initial phase, and then hopefully become second knowledge to them, and then it becomes okay. But you've got that problem where someone has an issue like the one I've just said, and then all of a sudden, hey, this system's no good, let's throw it out.
Yeah.
And you've achieved nothing.
And what have you learned about that sales process and the fact that you've not only got one person that you're talking to, you're not just talking to an owner, you're not just talking to the bookings person, there's more than one person involved in a sale, isn't there?
There is. And I guess going back to finding our ideal customer at this stage of our journey, the processes that we've been talking to, we're sort of focusing on 1 to 3 restaurants. That has 1 to 3 restaurants, rather than someone who's got 50 restaurants at this stage, because the approval process is too great. Because you've got to talk to the owner. If it's a single owner, then he refers you to his operations manager. Operations manager refers you to the reservation staff member. And you sort of go through this process. But even if you which takes sort of too long and too many people involved, it's too complicated. There's too many systems that they've got to consider. But if you're sort of taking an owner that's got 1 to 3 venues, then you still have certain issues as well. Because the owner would sort of see it, everything makes sense, says, let's go ahead. Then, where does the restaurant manager or the reservations person have a vested interest in this journey? I mean, if you're talking about the reservations person, we've completely automated and optimized reservations, in which case you don't need a reservation person.
Yeah,
so
right.
If you go and talk to that person, then you know what the answer is, no. I mean, if you talk to the owner, then the owner will turn around and say, okay, I can use that reservation person elsewhere more productively, and I'll get more value out of it. So he sees the problem totally differently, Or if you're talking to an operations manager or a general manager of a restaurant, again, he sort of looks at it and says, okay, I've got to go through this hurdle of changing a system and learning a new one and training my staff. What's the benefit in it for me?
Yeah, I think it's such great learning about what I would describe as founder-led sales. What you're going through is that founder-led sales. Like, there's no way you could hire a salesperson right now and say go sell, because you're still uncovering all of these little challenges of how to actually approach customers and learn. As you just said, the bookings person, you might be taking away their job, but if you approach that in the right way, that can end up being a great thing for the restaurant and maybe even for that bookings person that can get repurposed into some more interesting work.
Look, absolutely, because then they can sort of be upgraded to do more interesting work. As you said, as simply just to answer the telephone, or just rearranging bookings on a screen, trying to optimize them after the event. If you're talking about the operations manager, it's then turning around and saying, okay, what are their pain points? Their pain points are the changeover, the training. So then you say, well, these are the ways we can help you through that process.
Yeah, so it's not just about the software, is it? It's about
correct
leading up to it. Yeah, that's fabulous.
So
just wanted to do a quick shout out to Jeff Denning that's online. It's great to have you with us, Jeff. You've been a long supporter, and thanks for the kind comments about the common threads that we're talking about here. Jeff saying that a lot of the founders that we have on are talking about the same things, and this idea of founder-led sales is one of those really common threads. And the experiences you're sharing is another great case study on how to go through that process that you need to go through as a founder, so you can codify how to sell for your specific industry and for your specific product. And once you package that up, then you can maybe think about hiring a professional salesperson.
Yep.
Sorry, I think I cut you off there, Peter. Were you going to make another point?
No. Look, I think you're 100% correct. You've got to go through that process.
Yeah. It's the founder-led sales, but it's also the founder-led marketing as well. I mean, as you're finding that, the typical kind of advertising-driven approaches for established product categories that work don't necessarily work for, building a completely new product category like you are. Have you got any thoughts or comments or ahas or lessons that you can share with founders that might be going through this or thinking about going through this? Because some of those marketing agencies are pretty compelling. It's like, just pay us this much money and we'll shower you with more leads and customers than you know what to do with.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've all had those promises. The thing is that how do you manage a process that you're remote from? How do you understand a process that you're remote from? And unless you go in there and get your hands dirty, if I could call it that, by learning firsthand and understanding what the issues are, then you're sort of in fool's paradise. I've had many, because I also operate out of a startup hub. There's other founders here that have gone out and on quite a few occasions have got very expensive salespeople on board. They don't understand their product. Then they stay there and they sort of give them what do you call it, share options and incentives to stay in the business. And then in 6 months' time, all of them have then had to turn around and try to dislodge these agreements they put in place because the salespeople didn't understand the product, or the salespeople came from a different environment and didn't understand the customer.
It's such a tragic and common use case because neither the founder or the salesperson fully understand what they're signing up for at the beginning. The salesperson goes, well, look at all the selling jobs I've had before and look at my great performance. And, they're obviously good at their job and good at what they do. And the founder looks at that and goes, this is exactly the sort of person I need. But neither of them fully appreciate that when you're innovating and building a new kind of product, that you have to go through this, we call it the disruptive innovation journey. And you have to go through this founder-led sales. So it's one of those unknown unknowns. And this is like a big category of problems that the reason why we exist as a company is to help founders see these unknown unknowns. Because once you know about a problem, founders are smart, they're hardworking, they'll figure it out one way or another. But it's the problem that you can't even see that are going to catch you out.
Yeah. And there's too many unknowns, as you call them. Whether it's determining whether the problem you want to solve needs to be solved, or the many steps along that way in that journey. Yeah.
I wanted to move on to a question which I think is particularly interesting, which is, if I can find it here. Well, let's jump to this one because it's easier to find. But this is from Jess in Adelaide, who's asking, as someone currently building a scheduling tool for a services business, I'd love to know, how did you balance solving operational complexity without overwhelming users with features? And I don't know, maybe you'd like to answer that in terms of what you wish you had done versus what you did do. Because as we just described, you sort of went through this process of sort of building the whole shebang, rather than what we would normally advise founders to do, which is like an MVP, find a niche to work with first. And we talked about the fact that you had this integration challenge. So yeah, just love to hear your thoughts on that to help Jess out with her challenge.
Look, I guess on one hand, we haven't gone out to the total market because we haven't tried to take over all point of sale systems. Because when you look at a point of sale system, you can put it into a supermarket, you can put it into a butcher, you can put it into a clothing store. Once you do that, then your point of sale system becomes like a blank document. You've got to give them, a blank sheet of paper, or, you give them a blank spreadsheet to work off. We didn't do that. We said our core focus is dine-in restaurants. So when we go into a dine-in restaurant, we're actually giving them something that's already complete. We can give them, their product tree. We can give them their accounts. We can give them standard reports. So we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper.
So you've got sort of a niche. I mean, to bring this to life, one of the features that I know you've described to me before, which I thought was particularly interesting, is if you've got a function in a restaurant, that function often has its own price list, doesn't it? Can
Yes.
you maybe talk about that use case, because I think that's a pretty interesting use case where it builds on what you're describing. You've built a point of sale system that's very specific for dining restaurants.
Look, I guess what we've tried to do with whenever we looked at features, the first thing we looked at is we've got a customer-centric system. So firstly, does the customer want it? And the customer being the diner. If the customer doesn't want it or the diner doesn't want it, then that's already scratched. If the customer then does want it, then you turn around and say, okay, how can we now do it in a way that's logically and operationally sensible for a restaurant? So we always go back to our initial point about being customer-centric. So when you sort of come to functions and events, now, technically every restaurant is quite happy to take large bookings, whether they be for a number of tables, a whole area, or the whole restaurant. So technically every restaurant is a function centre. So when you go through it and you say, okay, the customer wants to have their birthday party or wants to have a graduation or wants to have a catch up with friends, then they've got a need. So we understand that, we're customer centric, we do that. Then from a restaurant's perspective, because there could be 40 people, if the 40 people don't show up, then they've just blown their revenue for the whole night if it's a small restaurant. So they need security up front. So therefore, they would potentially have a different menu where it's, in most cases, restaurants have small kitchens because they need to keep space for the dining room. So they can't really mass produce 40 meals to order. So you go on a set menu or a reduced menu. So then you've got to do that. Then you sort of got to send them a proposal. Then they've got to accept it. Then it becomes a contract. Then you've got to send them an invoice for prepayment to make sure that they're going to come. So it's a completely different process. But the reality is it needs to be tied back to your floor plan and interact with your other bookings if there's other bookings as well. So then we sort of go through and expanded that to bring it into the system. But we only did that because of our customer-centric approach, saying that the customer needed it and then doing it in a way that was efficient operationally.
Yeah, I think that you said that quite a few times during your answer there about being customer-centric. And I think that is the takeaway for Jess and anyone else is, start with the customer. And I think you've obviously got that, that mindset from your restaurant days, being customer service centric, bringing that into the software world is just hugely valuable. And I speak to so many founders where I ask the question, what does the dream outcome for the customer look like? And it's a blank stare. They've thought about the technology and they've thought about the product, but it's really clear from your descriptions that you deeply, deeply understand not only the customer that you're selling to, your economic buyer, but you also understand the diner, which we refer to as the ultimate end user or your customer's customer. And that mindset and that approach and the culture that you're building in the company is absolute gold.
Yeah, I guess from when I started, maybe it's because I was a restaurant guy and I understood that a restaurant only survives by the customers it has and the experiences it gives to customers and the personalisation. So therefore, you turn around and say, if I can create that link between the customer and the restaurant, then they're both stronger in the process. And my software is harder to dislodge after it's gone in there.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we were working with a coffee shop owner a few years ago, and the first thing I did when working with them is go be a barista for a day and see what it's actually like working in the restaurant, working in the cafe. You get such a great appreciation. I think that's the answer to Jess's question. Moving on to David from Melbourne. I've been debating whether to build a niche tool or go broader. Did you feel pressure to expand outside of hospitality, and how did you stay focused? I think you've kind of answered that, but do you want to give David a bit of a summary?
Yes. Well, see, hospitality is very wide because, whether you're talking about McDonald's, whether you're talking about, KFC, whether you're talking about, a three-hat restaurant.
Food truck.
Or a food truck, in theory, hospitality, could also be hotels. And there's optimization that can be done there as well. So look, while it appears we're wide, if you call us hospitality, I think, we're clearly defined to sit down restaurants as our core target. And then, so I think there is a limit to our broadness. But what I would say is, if you're building a niche tool, if there's still growth and marketing you can do in that niche market you're in, continue focus on that. Do that properly. Because after you do that and after you get your penetration, you can always go broader. But if you go broader on day one or early on, then you're not going to get the market penetration that I think you probably deserve if you stay focused.
Yeah, 100%. There's a Goldilocks zone, isn't there? I say to founders, you want about 5,000 clients in your niche. Any less than that, and sales and marketing becomes difficult because there's a good stat, whether you believe it or not, is 3% of buyers are ready to buy. So if only 3% of those 5,000 people are ready to buy today when you're trying to sell, then you don't have 5,000 customers at all. So you need a big enough market to work in. So that's sort of the lower bound, and the upper bound is basically as small as you can make it. So the more niche you are, the more targeted and specific you can be. So yeah, hopefully, David, that answers your question. Let's see, we've got Nat from Adelaide. On pre-launch, I'm struggling with prioritizing features in the early days of WizButler. What decisions did you make about what to build first, and what did you hold back on? Again, we've talked a lot about this, but for Nat, how would you summarize?
Well, I guess we started with the booking system because that was a first point of diner contact, which goes back to customer centric. I knew other problems existed before the booking system, but we started there with the diner. So if you're talking about what you build first, I think it depends what your product is, but see if you can go all the way back to the origins of where your benefit starts. And then, as you're building those features, make sure that you're pretty comfortable that people will use those features and those features add value. Because if those features, make you feel better, you don't want to build them, not at this stage. You want to build features that have real value, and I guess, using your terminology, Kirk, pants on fire scenarios.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe just to help out, just to show what we at LeapSheep call the disruptive innovation journey, the second stage in that journey, the segment validation, is where you do user research. And that really should answer your question. What are the things that your potential users care about the most? What are they willing to pay for? What do they prioritize? If you've gone out there and done that user research, and I should highlight, there are many ways to do bad user research that maybe fools you into thinking that you've got the data you need when actually you haven't. So you need to be aware of that. But to go do high quality user research, that should really drive your feature set. That's really the answer. But fabulous. All right. Let's see. We've got Matt from Sydney with a question. What's been the hardest part of building a scalable tech product inside a traditional industry? What would you do differently if you were starting again?
Well, I guess, just to give a couple of examples, we sort of got fooled, I guess, by my experience of 18 years in hospitality, thinking that we could take on the world. And as you go through the process, you realise the world is bigger than one person. So as a founder, ideally, you need to get other people around you that can help in that journey, whether they're getting additional founders or whether it's getting outside services like LeapSheep or to help you. But I guess with the problems that I see that I've done in the past is I went there and applied for patents. And when you apply for a patent, You've got to tell the world exactly what you're doing. Otherwise, the patent office can't assess whether your invention is good or bad.
Yeah, like a competitive reveal, isn't it?
100%. You're fully exposed because you tell them exactly what you're doing. So if you fail and you don't get your patent, which is, like going to the casino and gambling, then you've lost. By the same token, if they can deconstruct what you're doing and you go and build it, well, you're still lost. You're caught between a rock and a hard place. And I mean, to give some real numbers, I went in down the patent process. Now it's sort of from 2017 to now is 8 years later, and I've spent 1.7 million.
Wow.
So when you look at it, maybe that 1.7 million could have been spent better elsewhere. Going and buying Bitcoin or Nvidia stock or something else. But that's one of the traps as a founder, that you go down that path without what do you call it? Having an exit ramp or a process where you can reassess.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. The founder-led selling and, the discussion that we had earlier about the journey that you go on to learn what the market's like and realizing that whatever you think the market is like is probably not what it's going to be like. I mean, it's that, that famous line, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yep.
You translate that into startup talk. I think Steve Blank has done that, and it says like everyone's got a business plan until you have contact with the customer.
Yeah.
And it kind of doesn't matter your background, whether you're like you're a industry veteran that's now selling into the industry that you're working in, or whether you're a total outsider. Your perception of what the market is going to do and how it's going to behave and the reality is very rarely aligned. And so you want to go in with the mindset of, I have to be a sponge and learn. I don't have to push my opinion onto the market and expect that it's going to come true. I really have to have that genuine curiosity, talk to people, really listen and empathize with what they're trying to tell you, and then be prepared to adjust your approach based on what you're learning.
And look, I sort of agree with that 100%. Because even in my case, when you look back at it, I thought I had enough knowledge in the industry because I was operating takeaway shops and cafes and bars and fine dining. So I thought I had a wide understanding of the market. But in reality, I had a wide understanding of the market from one person's eyes.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I fall into exactly the same category. I thought, after 12 years at Microsoft and launching, dozens of products and being part of creating products and researching products and being part of the channel network before that, I thought I understood innovation inside out, upside down, left and right. But the startup world is just, such a different kettle of fish. And that lean startup methodology that Eric Ries talks about in the Lean Startup book, that unfortunately just about everyone that reads it doesn't actually take away the core message from that book, which is go forward with tiny experiments. That's really the message from that book, and that's kind of what we're saying is go forward with tiny experiments that are cheap, that are fast, that are going to allow you to learn, and then build on those learnings and create the next series of experiments. Unfortunately, most people take away the concept of a minimum viable product. And that's turned into sort of standard language that's almost mainstream. People in mainstream business understand what an MVP is these days. But that's not really the takeaway from the lean startup. It's about small iterative learning and the fact that you don't understand what the market wants, and that's the best way to find it out.
So I guess my experience is I went about it the wrong way. Thankfully, I'm still here. And things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
But yes, if I was to start again, it would be completely different.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, I wonder if we can fit one more question in, and I think this is another question that you've sort of partially answered already, but this is from Ali in Adelaide. We're working on a SaaS platform for tradies, and adoption's been slow. How did you get buy-in from busy hospitality staff who might not be tech savvy? And what did you learn about product onboarding? How have you found that talking to either bookings people or managers about what is a fairly tech savvy product, and as you said before, it's a business process that they might not be thinking about. How are you finding that?
Well, what I've learned is you don't talk tech. They're not interested in tech. They don't even, start the conversation with tech. So therefore, you don't have to worry about whether they're tech savvy or not.
Great answer. I love it.
All you've got to do is see if you can understand the problem they've got and talk to them about the problem they've got, and get buy-in to the fact that they have a problem. Once you have that, then you can show them how easy your no-brainer offer and your solution is.
Brilliant. Couldn't have said it better myself, Peter. That's awesome. Look, we're running out of time, but it's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show. I've learned a lot as always. I hope the founders that have joined have learned a lot. I wish you all the best going forward. You've got a fabulous product. Now, if you've got any, or if we've got any restaurant owners that are listening, or any founders that know any restaurant owners, easy to contact Peter. There's a QR code there. Peter's also, you can find him on LinkedIn or at WizButler.com, and you offer a simple discovery call just to connect and have a chat to see whether the sort of problems that you solve might be appropriate for a restaurant owner. So that's a great place to start. Anything you want to add to that, Peter?
So look, appreciate your time. Thank you for the opportunity of, sharing my journey. If I've helped somebody, I greatly appreciate it. Happy to connect with anyone who wants to talk about restaurant or the restaurant space, or the challenges as a founder, and we can take it from there. Again, thanks for your time, Kirk.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. Well, the next show is going to be another great one on the 8th of August. We've got Margot Bartholomew-Carl from Ardant Advantage. Ardant Advantage is tackling one of Australia's most urgent healthcare bottlenecks by using technology to radically improve access to allied health services. If you're curious about how a startup can solve a high-stakes real-world problem, or want to ask your own questions about the founder journey, this is a session you won't want to miss. Margot is fabulous and is really embodying a lot of the things that we've talked about today about how to approach innovation and how to use those small experiments to validate the market and the problem, and how to go to market and do that founder-led selling. You can use those QR codes there to book for the session, and you can also use the second QR code there to send in a question ahead of the show if you'd like Margot to answer a question, or if you'd like me to ask a question about startups. And then, of course, finally, if you're a founder and you're looking for more clarity and less frustration on your startup building journey, at LeapSheep, we do something called a Startup Builder Strategy Session. This is guaranteed the best 2 hours that you can spend of your time, where we'll teach you exactly a crystal clear framework for how to avoid startup failure, and specifically for your particular startup and your particular situation, how to build a plan to use your time and capital as best you possibly can. There's a link at the top to book that strategy session. If you don't feel you're ready for that, you can also book a clarity call with me, and I'd love to chat. I always love to chat to founders. I speak to a dozen or more founders every week to figure out what's working and what's not as the startup market continues to evolve and technology continues to evolve. So that's a wrap for this week. Thanks again, Peter, and we'll see everyone on the 8th.
Thank you.